This is absolutely insane, people. We are driving towards nuclear war right now, and nobody is really talking about it here anywhere in the West. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity, and I'm here to talk about this, which is this insane drive to nuclear war. Why is it only the blogosphere talking about this, really, right? We see plenty of channels out there talking about it, but really not in the way it needs to be talked about in the center media of really Canada, U.S., most of Europe. Although I think Europe's getting a little ahead of this because, of course, they're in the front lines of the firing zone. I think this is the eerie silence before the war, possibly. And remember, all of this changed when we saw this, which is the launch of the IRBM, the Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile. You can see it coming down through the clouds down here. Right, shunk. That's six dummy warheads, but not really a dummy because they're coming in with full kinetic energy. 6x6, 36 strikes. We still don't have images from the place it struck, so we've heard that it did some severe damage. Hopefully that woke a few people up. Certainly woke me up. This really caught my attention big time, as it should have. And by the way, this is the Oreshnik missile, which George H. here, I didn't have permission to use his full name, a subscriber at Peak Prosperity said, hey, clever Russians with the name of the hazelnut flowers, those are called catkins. That's the male flower of the hazelnut tree, which, by the way, blooms this time of year here in the Northeast. So you might be able to see those. Doesn't it look like that? That's the hazel. Clever Russians with the name and hazelnut flower looking like warheads. And so that's what we saw come down. Now, this should have changed everything. Now, in the immediate aftermath of that, the New York Times comes out with this headline here. They've got 4 people on this, some of their deep state mouthpieces and all that other stuff. I don't call them reporters anymore. But they did put something out there that we were supposed to talk about, and I guess they wanted us to know this little piece of news, which is deeply unsettling. First, the headline of this is Trump's vow to end the war could leave Ukraine with few options. Sad face. You know what? I'm a big believer that any country out there needs to stand on its own feet. And if it wants to completely piss off its neighbors, whether that's Israel, whether that's Ukraine, hey, you kind of got to work that out for yourselves. And Ukraine actually had plenty of options to avoid this war beginning in 2013, 2014. Maybe if it hadn't killed 14,000 Russian-speaking people from 2014 to 2022, maybe it could have avoided this war. Or maybe it could have taken the peace offering that was on the table there early in 2022 and not listened to Boris Johnson. There are lots of things that Ukraine could have done. You know who left Ukraine with few options? It was them listening to the neocons of the United States, France, and Britain in particular. Okay, so this comes out on November 21st, and it's talking about how 2 years ago, General Mark Milley, then the chief military advisor to President Biden, suggested that neither Russia nor Ukraine could win the war. A negotiated settlement, he argued, was the only route to peace. His remarks caused a furor among senior officials. They're very sprouty faces, very, very mad. But President-elect Donald Trump's win is turning General Milley's prediction into reality. Or, hear me out, reality has turned into reality. It's not, that wasn't a prediction. That was just observing stuff that all of us out here in the non-insane quadrant of the country have been noticing for a long time. If you've been watching New York Times reporters, you could have gone online, looked at these point of view videos that were coming out from all the drone strikes, all the attacks, and found out that warfare has completely changed. It's a completely nasty, brutish thing. Individual personalized death coming from above as people are hunted down by these loitering munitions and also first-person flown videos. Both sides, it's a big deal. We saw this a long time ago. What General Milley was observing was just anything anybody with a set of eyes and a small amount of curiosity could have worked out for themselves years ago. So all of the death and destruction that's happened, all of the Ukrainian men lost since then have just been thrown into a pointless exercise by people like this. But here's where it gets really bad in this article. Down in yellow, quote, several officials even suggested that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. That would be an instant and enormous deterrent. But such a step would be complicated and have serious implications. All right. everybody, first off, I am so tired of the New York Times getting out there and using their little press pass, hall pass to get unnamed officials to say stuff. Listen, did you guys make this up? Is this a real quote? If they're real people, put a name to it. Can we just be done with this unnamed senior official junk? It's not reporting. I know it feels like you're close to the halls of power and you want to preserve your access to it, but this is crap. These people, they have names, and we need to know who their names are because they are traitors to humanity. These are not good people, okay? That they even suggested this means they should be blacklisted forever from anything that looks like a senior position or the halls of power. In fact, anything beyond dog catcher, probably not, okay? This is awful that they were even suggesting this because it's clearly obvious what would happen. First off, nuclear weapons taken since the fall of the Soviet Union, those did not belong to Ukraine. They were part of the Soviet Union. Those are actually Soviet weapons. They were actually Russian weapons. So they got taken away, which is a good thing because if you know anything about Ukraine, you know it's a deeply corrupt, totally nasty country that really shouldn't have nuclear weapons. If there was a candidate country where I'm like, yeah, they probably shouldn't have them, Ukraine would be right at the top of that list for me for all sorts of reasons. Don't have time to go into all of those right now. This is a huge bombshell. That there were people seriously considering this tells you how violently stupid these people are or ungrounded in the realities of the actual world. Of course, these are the same people who would have been surprised in a furor that you would suggest that potentially this war that's unwinnable would be unwinnable because they're not grounded in reality. Unfortunately, Putin is grounded in reality. We showed this at the time when it came out this summer, but here he is talking again. This is the first public statement where he said basically this sentiment.
И поэтому речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их...
There it is. If these long-range weapons, but in particular if nuclear weapons were transferred to NATO, it is known that it would be the considered approach of Russia to say, well, that's the same thing as if NATO's directly involved. It's meaningless that the United States gives nuclear weapons to Ukraine, who then uses them. It doesn't stop there. Obviously, that's a direct attack on Russia by the United States with nuclear weapons. Time out. How is this not front page news everywhere? Why are you hearing about this from me or from Alex Jones or from Tucker Carlson or from Redacted or from Patrick Bet-David? Why are you not here? This is insane. So that tells me that our mainstream media is still completely co-opted by whatever it was that hopefully we've started to get a change in, because this deserves a full-throated conversation. All of us. None of this, don't worry your pretty little head, Chris. We got this. We're the experts. Hey, we don't trust experts anymore. They have violated their sacred contract with the people. The elites are just out of touch, and they are now saying crazy stuff like this. Maybe we should just give nuclear weapons to Ukraine. Right? And they lack the context of understanding what they're doing. That's how it appears from out here. And I think that's probably an accurate view at this point in time. So that's why I had to go out and issue an alert about these sorts of things. I issued an alert this past Friday. There it is. You can see that's the thumbnail and that's the title. So what's an alert? An alert I issue at Peak Prosperity to my subscribers when something happens that causes me and Evie to take new direct action to become more prepared. Now, we're pretty prepared, right? We live on a farm. We have we've been at this for years. We have basically, good clean water and food and a community. So we've been doing this a while. We know not everybody's at that place. Many people are just now waking up to the idea of like, oh, these are some real risks. What can we do? What should we do? So I issue alerts very rarely. This might be the fifth one in 15 years of business. I've issued one in October of 2008, right before the banks collapsed. And I said, go get some cash out of the bank, right? I issue them rarely. Why did I do this? So first up, I got a nice critique from a subscriber saying, hey, This here's a very serious alert. It has to be based only on verified information. There are many red lights flashing. We don't need to speculate. It doesn't add anything to the equation saying, hey, don't be alarmist. I hate being alarmist. It took me many days to figure out that I was even going to send this alert. So I said, quote, this is an excellent point. I take issuing alerts extremely with the utmost seriousness. I had resisted doing so for several days, but the fact pattern had Evie and I activated, which is one of my main criteria for issuing an alert. And the ratcheting provocations became too large to ignore. I had many private conversations behind the scenes with people I trust who had come to the same conclusion. The odds of a major eruption between Russia and the West were serious and too high to ignore. Naturally, I hope for the same thing as everybody, that all this dies down, and we look back and wonder if, hey, maybe we were overly alarmed. My frame for such events is to know that nothing is ever determined until it actually happens. Everything is a sea of probabilities and risks before then. So I never wait for 100% confirmation that such a thing is going to happen, because by then it already has happened, which means your chance to prepare is now in the rearview mirror. Remember, when adjusting to a new and large risk, anything you do before it transpires will feel like a complete overreaction. But afterward, when you're looking back on it, you'll realize you actually underreacted. End quote. So that's the tension we're caught in right now, this adjustment reaction. A new, very large risk has just surfaced on the landscape. And a lot of you, I know you're watching this right now going, should I do something? No, that would be crazy. I don't want to be crazy. Should I react? Should I do something? Some of you do some things. You feel like, oh, wow, I'm overreacting here. If this comes to pass and we get into a nuclear war, anything you have done will have been a complete and ridiculous underreaction to actually what you should have done before this happened. So that's the balance. We have to struggle with that adjustment reaction. So looking at that, what were my reasons for issuing this alert on Friday? Well, Putin had said quite clearly that any use of NATO-supplied long-range missiles inside Russia would be considered an attack by NATO on them, putting them at war with NATO directly. So I just showed you that clip. The U.S. then authorized the use of ATACMS missiles deep inside Russia after the election. There was already a referendum mandate election that said, hey, we're going with Trump, whole new guy in town, and this is a lame duck presidency has decided, let's dial this up. Let's do something that Russia has said is a bright red line. This should not happen. I think everybody in the White House needs to be cleared out of power right now, not January 20th, right now, because they are doing something they should not be doing, which is provoking a war in the last few minutes they have left. It's just like they're taking a dump on the bar stool on their way out. I mean, it's just not right, and I'm really mad about it, as you can probably tell. And then Ukraine went ahead and shot those missiles deep into Russia. Russia issued an even more serious sounding warning, which was followed by the UK then authorizing the use of Storm Shadow cruise missiles, which were then used, potentially with lethal effect on Russian and North Korean personnel, which was then followed by Russia using a hypersonic missile for the first time ever in human history as a weapon of war. And thankfully with dummy warheads, but we don't know how much actual damage they did. So that was my data. I said, wow, that's plenty to say this is really serious. The fact that you're not reading about this, hearing about this, that it's not all over the news, that there aren't people who are legitimately pushing the anti-war peace agenda out there on TV and telling people clearly about what we are risking, which is everything. Until you see that, I can tell you that your media, your mainstream media, is severely compromised and is now an enemy of peace, an enemy of people who would like to have reasoned, intelligent, thoughtful, considered conversations. So, with that said, continuing on with that New York Times article, they said here too, but Pentagon officials have expressed confidence that all these shipments of new armaments would be challenging for the Trump administration to suspend aid that had already been approved by Congress and set into motion. So the Pentagon officials have said, we see that there's this new sheriff coming into town. There's a whole new mandate. People have spoken. We better subvert that while we can and do stuff that we think is going to be hard for this new president to undo because we feel like it's important to be done. I didn't vote for that. You didn't vote for that. Nobody voted for that. This is just the military industrial complex of the United States doing what it does, which is just making a lot of money for some contractors as it dials things up and subverting the will of the people who clearly didn't vote for this. And I would suggest strongly voted for the opposite of this. So the Pentagon officials, they're confident that they could basically hamstrung the Trump administration. Yeah, what are you going to do? How are you going to suspend the aid? We've already given it. It's already in motion. It's very hard to stop. That deserves a firing right there. Carrying on in green, in another shift this month, the Pentagon said it was lifting a ban on U.S. military contractors deploying to Ukraine to help the country's military maintain and repair U.S.-provided weapon systems, particularly F-16 fighter jets and Patriot air defenses. Oh, yeah, hey, that election thing? Tell you what, we're going to lift that. And by the way, they also lifted the ban on using U.S. mines, anti-personnel mines, against Russia. So we'll throw in the mines. We'll throw in, contractors, which is really, they're U.S. Might as well be the U.S. military directly. They call them contractors for various reasons, but they're the part of the U.S. military. And so they're here again subverting what they suspect is going to be the will of Donald Trump, who has said quite clearly he's going to come forward and just put an end to this and say, that's it, we're all done. This is not useful enterprise, and it's not, right? You just saw another $7 or $8 billion out the door towards Ukraine compared to nothing for the people of North Carolina who just got hurt in Hurricane Helene, nothing for the people of Lahaina, nothing for the people who are now record homelessness across the country, nothing, because that's not our priorities. Our priorities are this stuff, and this has to change, or we just can't have nice things. Maybe we can have no things if this escalates and gets out of control. The Defense Department here also is soliciting bids for a small number of contractors who would be far from the front lines and would not be fighting Russian forces, to which I would say, Hazel, that the Hazel missile just showed that I don't care how far you are from the front lines, there is no far from the front lines anymore. Clue bag. Yeah. And also, Pentagon officials are aiming to award contracts before Mr. Biden leaves office. Quick, through the process. Although the process normally takes 4 to 9 months, again, openly subverting what I would say is the will of the electorate. Now, you'd think, oh, okay, well, Chris, I haven't really been hearing more about this. New York Times at least printed some of this. Obviously, they print this because they think this is something that they're authorized to say. So what they're clearly signaling here is, hey, we're talking about ways to ratchet this all the way up to nuclear conflict, and we are going to do everything we can to subvert the will of Trump, which, of course, is the New York Times' main thing. That's how that's its identity. It's just trying to, anything Trump is for, they have to be against, even when it's for not having a nuclear war. I swear to God, if Trump comes out and says, I don't want to have a nuclear war, the New York Times will find a way to say, well, then I guess we have to find a way to rationalize having one. That's how deranged they have become. This is mental illness, as far as I can tell. Institutionalized. That's how I experience it, because why wouldn't we build towards peace and prosperity? Why would we build towards uncertain outcomes and potentially ending it all? This is just gross. And I thought we voted against this, but they're not going to go down without a fight, which I told you to be prepared for, because that's the world we live in now. So there are continued escalations in rhetoric. Since I gave you that bullet point list, this just came out today that NATO has announced the possibility of preemptive strikes against Russia. Preemptive. Those would be called first strikes. That's a good way to have a lot of things go pear-shaped very quickly. Quote, NATO is discussing the application of preventive precision strikes, yeah, that's what they always are, on territory of Russia in the event of an armed conflict with one of the countries of the alliance. This was announced by the head of the NATO Military Committee, Admiral Rob Bauer. He noted that the alliance no longer considers itself solely a defensive structure. Well, that means it has an offensive structure. Okay, and he said NATO does not plan to sit and wait for an attack, but is ready to strike the first blow. Hey, what could go wrong? Listen, people, this is deadly serious. This kind of stuff, whether you're not being exposed to it, even though this kind of crazed rhetoric is not showing up on your TV news feed, believe me, this is showing up in Moscow. This comes from Pravda, by the way, as you can see in the link down there, which is one of the outlets I have to turn to now to get any sort of news at all. This is news. Could not find this in my own newspapers at the time this came out. As well, in the BBC, just the other day, 2 days ago, we found out that France has authorized the use of Scalp long-range missiles and said, quote, their French foreign minister told the BBC that there are no red lines when it comes to support for Ukraine. No red lines. You mean, it's one of those things, a little winky wink. What they're saying here, let me decode that for you. If they can figure out how to target these Scalp missiles to directly take out Putin, that would be a red line. It is no longer on the table. No red lines. So this is very much a thing that says, hey, we're ready, willing, and able to attack anything and anybody up to, with no red lines, up to Putin himself, which, of course, this is not a very de-escalatory kind of a thing, you might say. This is clearly escalatory. So the escalations of rhetoric have been happening. So since I sent out my alert on Friday, what has happened? Well, France has authorized the Scalp missiles with no red lines. We've seen, it's been revealed that some U.S. officials were in support of handing nukes to Ukraine with delivery systems and targeting, of course. I mean, they're no good if you don't have like the access codes and authorization codes and targeting and a means of getting them there. The Pentagon has lifted a ban on U.S. contractors deploying to Ukraine. We've just found that out. And as well, we found out that the Pentagon has authorized the use of anti-personnel mines in Ukraine. And what did we find out here? NATO has proposed an offensive first strike on Russian targets, potentially. And France and the UK are now also openly talking about sending troops to Ukraine. I mean, France and Great Britain, of course, had such a wonderful time in the last World War and the one before that I guess they're just eager to get back to that. So I'm going to go on to part 2 here with my subscribers. Is this the eerie silence before the war? I want everybody to be prepared. I got a lot more information and data. This is the amount I can put out here in public for now. If you want to have the most robust conversation about the things that are actually happening in the world, come on by peakprosperity.com, become a subscriber, and then you can be in the Cool Kids Club where we discuss all of these things openly like adults and without any limitations because, well, we believe we can. And it's our right, if not our obligation and duty, to talk about what's actually going on in the world. If you don't, do everything you can, please, to become prepared, become resilient, become ready, and do not take your cues from what they are not talking about in the media. They're doing you a disservice. They're doing all of us a disservice. And I think they have some soul searching, and they really ought to look long and hard in the mirror. And if they did that honestly, they wouldn't like what they saw. With that, Chris Martinson here of peakprosperity.com. Please come on by Peak Prosperity for more information. Urgent times. Hope to see you there. Bye-bye.